troubleshooting.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Sure.
Okay, I think we're gonna, you want to speak in the.
Okay.
Can you give it just 1 second and let him get it connected back to the website? We had broke connection. Once you break connection, you got to get
Okay.
OIT to put it back. But it looks like we have sound going, not a whole big old screen, but I think.
Okay, if they
There
can
it goes.
make it out.
We're good.
Are we sure?
It is showing.
Is there sound? Can people
There is
participating
sound.
by webinar hear me?
Well, they're about to, don't worry.
There's a 45-second delay.
Sure.
From what they're seeing and what you're saying.
Okay.
Pardon?
Do you need to remind him again about checking?
Oh, we'll figure that out.
Okay, any problems? Or is it working?
I don't know, I'm asking.
They're getting.
Like I said, you've got to
Thank-
call them, they got to go out to the YouTube site, grab it, and then connect it to our website.
Oh,
OIT does.
Yes.
It's an awful lot of work.
Yes, sir.
Thank y'all.
okay.
Is it good?
We are. No, we're troubleshooting right now, and we're hopeful that it will be
Within minutes.
No, no problem.
Y'all ever
We
seen a
have
grown woman
instilled
cry?
panic in
It's
those
legal. Yeah, as long as it works.
Okay, I feel like I've got to say something though. People want.
Started, we're about to just, gonna have to, I don't know what to do.
What are they saying?
Nothing, and nobody has said yet that they can hear us.
Yeah.
Well, we've got OIT fixing to connect it back to the website. We broke the connection.
How long
Sure,
does this
had-
process take?
Right.
Just seconds.
Okay.
Once they grab it, it's live.
Okay. They're grabbing. OIT is grabbing.
Yep.
Oh, wait, I
Is
can
it?
hear the speaker now.
Okay, good. Everybody can hear? All right. Everybody can hear. All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started just because we are running out of time. And if there is a break in service for those who are attending by webinar, then we're just going to simply continue it over. We will work with you. We will get another training date. I have even offered to do one-on-one training with people before. We will get you trained. Don't worry about it. But in the interim, just know that your attempt to comply certainly is good with us, and we will make note of that, and we will work with you however we have to. So those of you who did show up today, thank you, especially those who drove from some distance to be here today. This will be less than an hour because I know I've got to get you out of here. My name is Tom Albritton. I'm the director of the State Ethics Commission. And as you know, lobbyists are under the jurisdiction of the Ethics Commission. And Vicki Manning, who I previously introduced you to, is your contact. For those of you who have attended by webinar before we got the problem straightened out, we did explain that if you have a question about registration, if you have a question about your forms, if you don't understand the forms that are online, then Vicki is the one you should contact, and you should contact her directly and feel free to do it. She is here as a resource for you. We expect you to use her, and we love it when you do because it makes your job easier, and it certainly makes our job easier as well. Vicki's been doing it for a long time, and there's not a question that you will ask her that she can't answer or that she won't give to us the answer. All right?
What do you want me to, if it is not working, do you want me to just tell them that we will do a makeup session?
Yeah, just tell them that we got to go on and that we'll just do a makeup session, that they are not to worry about the...
Somebody else now is saying they can hear, so maybe.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's working
Okay,
now.
yeah,
I mean,
all right.
we're live.
Okay, maybe then if there is a problem, it is on their end.
Maybe,
All right.
okay.
Now remember that what we'll go over today these are the bare minimums from an ethics standpoint. You can certainly do more than what the code requires. You can be more compliant than the code requires. These are just simply the floor, not the ceiling. Remember that we are in a period of time right now where ethics is front and center in the discussion. Each of you know that there have been discussions about how to revise the ethics laws. There's been a bill that's been proposed that would make significant changes to the ethics laws and also to your corresponding duties. And so all of this discussion really is against the backdrop of this that's been going on in our state for several years now. The issue of ethics in Alabama certainly predates 2010, but 2010 was an important moment when the legislature revamped the ethics laws to the form that we currently operate under. And it was in reaction, at least in part, to corruption issues that had arisen in state government prior to that period of time. Since 2010, there have been other issues that have come up. So this issue of ethics and compliance and what lobbyists do and what you pay for and what you report and the relationship you have with public officials is really front and center in the public mind and also in the mind of the public officials who serve over in the legislature. There are innumerable examples of how these issues have bubbled up in front of the public. And these slides that I've shown you really are over just the last couple of years. It's been a very active period, both at the state level, the county level, and the local level, federal level. Mickey Hammond, this was a federal prosecution of a state level official involving campaign finance issues. Oliver Robinson, which I know y'all are aware of. Can you see okay? Which I know you're aware of. Sheriff, Barber County sheriffs have been in the news as well. Sheriff of Limestone County, the city level, Birmingham Waterworks Board. I mean, that's still the case that has not gone to trial yet, but all of these prosecutions, with the exception of Mickey Hammond, involve things that have been given to public officials, the motivation behind why it was given, who was giving and why they were giving. Former county administrator, 20 years for taking $750,000 in her official capacity. The point of this is that the issues that we see and that the AG's office sees and that the district attorneys see are not limited to state level. They're not limited to county. They're not limited to Republicans, Democrats, big cities, small towns. They are everywhere. However, in each of these situations, these are people who have been found to have violated the act because they intended to do it. You hear a lot of talk about people going to prison for a $27 dinner. None of these people have gone to prison for a $27 dinner. It's relevant. The limits are certainly relevant in much the same way that a speed limit is relevant. If you're going 85 and a 55, there's going to be some consequence for that, but people are not really going to prison for that. If you've got guns and drugs in your trunk, then that's going to make it a very different thing. So when I talk to people about the ethics laws, and especially those of you who will be interacting with government, I do want to remind you that it's intentional violations that are the felonies that people are going to prison for. The other violations are important. They're lower in the scale of violations of our act. They, in combination with other factors, are problems for you to worry about and for the public officials to worry about for sure. But at the end of the day, so much of what we do and so much of these limitations we've got are from the perspective of trying to give the public a lot of confidence in their elected officials, at least as much as any system can create. And so you see these limitations like on meals and the things you can transfer to public officials as being part of this system to, I hate to say optics, but to make the optics of it look good. The public sees lobbyists taking representatives out to dinner and a lot of money being spent, and even if everybody's paying for it themselves, the public draws certain conclusions from it because they are primed to do it. And that goes back to the first slides that I showed you. And people are just making this assumption. So part of what I try to do in these seminars is to sensitize you to what that perception is, what we see, complaints we see coming through our office, what they are about, and even though we dismiss the overwhelming majority of everything filed with us, at the heart of those complaints usually is that somebody saw something and then they talk to somebody and it starts out with something that looks bad. That's just out there, so be sensitive to it. Also be sensitive to the fact, and I'll talk about this in a little bit more detail, everything you file with us is a public record, and it's accessible by the public. They will see your registration, they will see who your client is, they will see the disclosures that you are required to make quarterly and that your principal is required to make quarterly as well. That's why this whole issue about the economic development bill was a big deal to the economic development community, because what is filed with us, if you register as a lobbyist, you also have to disclose what areas you're lobbying in and what areas, what levels you're lobbying. And so the economic development community felt that with that kind of disclosure, it would hurt economic prospects coming in the state or wanting to come into the state. So for you, just remember that what you do is going to be seen or able to be seen by a public that cares. Generally, that's the press, who will go through our website and they'll match up. They'll match up an event that you've given with what you've disclosed, and they'll see if they think that you have disclosed the right amount that you're supposed to disclose. Again, it's a skeptical public, and it's a public that watches. All right, and most of that's going to come through our website. Our website is built to be accessible by the public, especially where public records are concerned. And your registration and your disclosures are public records. So the public doesn't have to ask us for your registration. They can just go on our website, drop down from the lobbyist tab, and search under your name or under your principal's name, and the documents will come up, as will the disclosures. Also on our website, if any of you are familiar with the pre-certification process, we've got any of you requested pre-certification before? Anybody have any idea what I'm talking about when I say that? You do. Okay, good. One person does. Well, great. That's why you're here. But the pre-certification process is a function of our office. It's a service that we provide that if you, for example, want to have a legislative reception, then you can ask us to approve that ahead of time as being compliant with the Act. Okay, does that make a little bit more sense now? When we approve something like that, what we're going to do is put it on our website in a calendar. Any member of the public, any member of the legislature, any other lobbyist can go to our calendar and they can see the events that we have pre-certified. They will also be able to see your letter requesting approval for it and our stamp approving that function. So all of that is accessible too. So those who are interested will see if you're having an educational function down at the Grand Hotel and you're covering hotel rooms for people for 3 days and meals, they're going to see if you've made the correct disclosure in your quarterly report where you've got to disclose certain items. And we've had people match that up. Interesting, I call it interesting. We started doing that about 1.5 years ago, 2 years ago. Putting all of that directly on our website. And it was in response to a couple of things. One, questions we were getting from the press and from the public asking for records about pre-certification and our approvals. And if they are public records and subject to disclosure, my attitude is let's go ahead and make them available because there's no reason not to. The second thing is I noticed that once we started doing that, it really cut down on the number of questions people had about that whole legislative reception kind of issue, educational functions. It educated the public a little bit more, and we stopped getting criticisms for it, and there stopped being things written about those kind of events, because when you start poring over those, you realize that most of them are just not all that exciting. Standing in the archives building with 500 of your sort of closest friends holding a drink or a cup of water or a bottle of water is just not really where all the corruption, if there is any, is occurring. So I think people have kind of gotten a little bit more comfortable with that, and so that's one value, I think, of having it on the website. We will also put notices on the website. If there is something we need to tell the lobbying community, the first thing that we'll probably do is get Vicki to email it out to all the registered lobbyists. But then the second thing that we will probably do is put it on our website if it's something that would directly affect you in case you didn't get the previous notice. But you will get emails from Vicki. If you are late getting your quarterly report in, Vicki will send you a nudge telling you that you haven't gotten it in. And we'll talk about your reporting requirements a little bit later. Any questions about any of this that I've gone over so far? Okay, this is our commission currently. We've got Jerry Fielding, who is our chief. He is a retired circuit judge from Sylacauga. Butch Ellis, who just rolled off. He was commissioner for the last 2 years. Retired Chief Justice Lynn Stewart is our new commissioner, taking his place. Got Charlie Price, who is a retired circuit judge from Montgomery. Beverly Brady, who is a lawyer from Auburn, Alabama, and John Plunk, who is a lawyer from Athens, Alabama. You may know this, but just kind of bear with me a minute. I am not the commission. I'm an employee of the commission. I work for these 5 individuals. They are appointed to staggered 5-year terms by the governor, lieutenant governor, and speaker of the House. Generally, every year somebody rolls off, a new person rolls on. But they're the ones who make all the official decisions. We're the staff who work for them. All of our official acts have to be approved by these 5 individuals. One of our functions is giving advice from our office, and we do have lobbyists who, and the principals who will ask for guidance from time to time through an informal opinion or a formal advisory opinion. Our informal opinion process, both forms of opinion must be in writing, but our informal opinion process is what we do the most of. We give out 900 plus of those a year. Which means that, on average about 15 a week, we're giving out informal opinions at all levels of government, and often it is to lobbyists. Do I have to disclose this? Do I have to, or individuals who want to know whether they have to register as a lobbyist? So just know that that opinion process is available to you too. We have had formal advisory opinions issued to lobbyists as well. We give a lot more informal opinions out, but there's a statutory difference between an informal opinion and a formal advisory opinion. A formal advisory opinion from us will protect you from prosecution if you rely on the documents within the four corners of the document, and you've given us the right facts, and you don't stray beyond the advice that was given. Informal opinions are really the staff's analysis of an issue based on previous advisory opinions or the clear language of the statute. Usually an informal opinion is going to be a very easy question to answer. It's not something that's been untested. It's easily discernible from the language of the code or our previous opinions on the subject, or even previous informal opinions we've given, but the answer is pretty well established. If you need a formal advisory opinion, we will tell you that. We will tell you that we're not going to issue an informal opinion on that subject, and you need to request a formal advisory opinion. Is this coming at you too fast, or is this okay? You comfortable with it so far? Okay, interrupt me if you want to. And it can only be perspective. You can't call us and say, hey, I did this last week. Did I screw up? Although I am sensitive to that. Although I will do my best to answer it in a way that is not endorsing or condemning conduct that has already occurred. We can all avoid that uncomfortable conversation if you'll just ask ahead of time. Okay? That's probably one of the key things that I would tell you is ask early, ask often, but give us a lot of time to thoughtfully consider any questions you may have. If it's about an event or if it's about application of the law, just give us plenty of time to answer it. We'll skip over this except to say intentional violations of our act are a felony, punishable by between 2 and 20 years in prison. Those are Class B felonies for intentional violations. Portions of our act that say you can't give any public official anything for the purpose of corruptly influencing their official action. If you engage in that conduct and are convicted by a jury, that is punishable as a felony, Class B felony. Other violations of our act are misdemeanors, punishable by up to a year. But we also have the ability to issue fines for low-level violations that the Attorney General or the District Attorney and we agree should be resolved that way. But that's basically what the enforcement mechanism is for us. We are a probable cause board, meaning that my commissioners find whether it is more likely than not there has been a violation of the act, and if they find there has been, we will refer it to an enforcement agency for prosecution. Now, in your dealings, you're going to not really be involved with that so much unless there's a complaint filed against you, okay, or a complaint filed against a public official based on your actions. But with you, the main thing you're going to need to worry about is just that you've registered, that you have updated your registration, that you have filed the disclosures that you need to, and that you've asked us for guidance within the context of what you can give a public official in terms of hospitality or other things. Okay, that's the main interaction that we're going to have with y'all. Overall theme of the act is that a public employer official cannot use their official position for personal gain, either for themselves or a family member or business they're associated with. So let's just say that you were of a mind to offer this great gift to the spouse of a public official. That's a violation of our act just as much as if you offered it to the public official. And the same if you do it to their children, even if it's an adult child. Now that, if you think about it, is where some questions may arise. Just in the normal dealings of your life, if you're sitting on a board and you give a contribution to a charity, is that okay? As a general rule, sure it is. But just remember that when you are dealing with family members of public officials, these same restrictions apply. And same with public employees, although it's a much smaller group. With public employees, you think your chief staff officers with or employees with like the Pro Tem's office. Those will be public employees. People you may deal with in state personnel, or us. Well, we're public employees. Their family members, our family members are covered too, but it's just a spouse and a dependent child with that. The takeaway for you is if you are dealing with a family member and you're not sure what the relationship is between them and you're not sure whether the transaction is a problem, what should you do? Yeah, just call. You should call and you should ask us. I don't expect you to memorize all of this stuff today. It would be great if you did, but I mean, there's an awful lot coming at you. I get it. So if you have a situation like that, just be sensitive to the fact that family members are covered. If you have a question, ask. The only way you're going to get in trouble is if you intentionally violate this act, or if you just simply don't ask questions when you know you should be asking questions. And there's no excuse for not asking questions, because we do want to answer them for you. Now, as a lobbyist, there's one section that clearly applies to you that says no lobbyist, subordinate of a lobbyist, or a principal shall offer or provide a thing of value to a public official or public employee or a family member. Okay, a thing of value is defined as any gift, benefit, favor, service, gratuity, tickets, passes to an entertainment or sporting event, unsecured loan, et cetera, promise of future employment. If it is reducible to a monetary value, it is clearly going to be a thing of value. Now, if you are offering something that is a favor or a benefit, and it gives you some concern about whether that is included within the definition of thing of value, again, what should you do? You should ask. You should ask for guidance with that. In the 4 years I've been here, I don't think anybody's ever asked a question about whether this favor I'm doing is covered under the definition of thing of value. So I don't know that it comes up that often. We get variations of it. Can I write a letter of recommendation on behalf of this person? Well, of course you can. But more often than not, it is something that is reducible down to a monetary value. Can I give tickets? Can I buy meals? And all of those are specifically provided for in the code, the restrictions around that. Okay, this time I'm going to turn it over to the General Counsel, Cynthia Ralston, and then I'll follow back up. Anybody, before I sit down, any questions about anything that I've gone over? Yes, ma'am.
Just one question. Is value quantifiable? Is there an amount to value? I mean, we all know what value is, but can you state an amount for value?
Sure. The question was, for those who are attending by webinar, is value quantifiable? Right. Is there a stated amount? There is a cutoff that anything below $25 is okay. All right, so de minimis is $25 and cap of $50 in a calendar year for an item. There is a separate exception for lobbyists and for principals for meals of $25 per occasion with an annual cap of $150, and for principals a $50 per meal with a $250 annual cap on that. All right, everything else is not quantifiable. But there are a lot of exceptions that apply that Cynthia will go into a little bit more detail about. Okay. Any other questions about that? And that's a great question. Thanks for asking it. Any other questions? All right. Well, I'm going to turn it over.
Okay. Hello. Okay, so he already talked about a lot about the exceptions to a thing of value, but the ones that are most important to you are the educational function, and that's defined. The transportation, lodging, expenses, and fees for meaningful participation of a public official or public employee and at an educational function or a widely attended event. Widely attended event, I don't know if y'all have ever heard of these, but if you haven't done pre-certifications, you may not have. But a gathering, dinner, reception, or other event of mutual interest to a number of parties at which it is reasonably expected that 12 or more people would be there. It doesn't have to be like an accounting conference. If there's more than 12 people, they have a differing view of events, right? So, I mean, diversity of views or interests. So if you have 50 accountants, that's going to be a diversity of views. Economic development, there's a specific exception for economic development. I don't think that y'all will necessarily be involved in that, but it's transportation and lodging costs to facilitate a public official or public employee's participation in an economic development event. So these are the three exceptions that when you're trying to figure out whether what you're offering is a thing of value, you look in the exceptions, okay? The hospitality exception includes food and beverages that are an integral part of your event, either an educational function, widely attended event, or an economic development function. There's a meal and beverages exception that Tom talked about, $25 per instance for lobbyists, $150 for the year, $50 for principals per instance, and $250 per year. We do the pre-certifications. There's almost like a checklist that you can go down. That it's a meeting, event, or activity for an educational event that's organized around a formal agenda or program, just like any conference you've gone to. It has educational or informational speeches, and it's concerning a matter within the scope of the participants' public responsibilities, okay? Widely attended event has to be all of the following: gathering, dinner, reception, or other event of mutual interest, more than 12 individuals. They have a diversity of views, and it's not purely social. So it can't just be a hunting or fishing a trip, or play shooting. It has to have some other purpose. We're going to ask you for a list of the public official and public employee invitees. You're going to have to provide that. And so it's not really that invasive. This is the point of it, is so that it's transparent, so everybody can see where our public officials and public employees are going and who's paying for it. If the event's under 50 people, a sign-in sheet's required. And then we need to know how many people you expect to attend. I mean, if you invite 150, you're not going to have 150 come. But so how many do you reasonably expect to attend? And we need to know what you're paying for. The payment of necessary transportation, what kind of transportation, what's the lodging, whether or not you're waiving the registration fees and costs, whether it's for a public official, a public employee, or a spouse of either. And what are they going to be doing at this event? They can't just attend. They need to be a speaker or panel participant by presenting information related to his or her agency or matters pending before his or her agency, performing a ceremonial function appropriate to their office, or it's appropriate to the performance of his or her official duties or representative function. So that has to have something to do with their official responsibilities. And then what are you providing? Is there hospitality? So for instance, you've gone to conferences where they have the first day after registration, or the second night they have an event where they have a band and drinks and food. That's an integral part of the function, because it's all participants are invited. It's in the middle of the conference. It's not during a time when an educational portion is being presented. And then the meals, what meals and where, what are the cost of the meals, and whatever else food and beverages that are being provided. You have to ask us at least 10 days in advance for a pre-certification, because if we have follow-up questions, we need clarification, and this is non-negotiable because it's an administrative rule of ours. So it has to be more than 10 days in advance. If you don't have something pre-certified, it doesn't mean that it is a violation of our act. It simply means you don't have it pre-certified. Technically, pre-certification is an exception to a thing of value. So you have your educational functions, your widely attended event, economic development, and there's a separate enumeration that it's been pre-certified by the executive director of the commission. But we can give you an opinion about, your event I say that. We won't give you an opinion about your event if it's less than 10 days before it, okay? But public officials like that because they want to have the letter, or they want to be able to go on a website and say, oh yeah, I can go to that. And they'll start calling us, and saying, hey, have you pre-certified this event yet? I need to know if I need to make plans to go. So, this is the old, let's see. Okay. All right, we've talked about that. Okay, so this is the stacking opinion. You cannot stack your meals. So if you're two lobbyists, or if you're a lobbyist and the principal for the same issue, you can't go to dinner and spend you can't combine your money at that meal. Okay, so you're out with a Senator Jones, and I'm the lobbyist for this principal. I can only spend $25, or the principal can only spend $50. We can't combine and make it $75, even if we're talking about the same issue or different issues, or if you're lobbyists for different people. So that public official is only going to get one meal of either $25 or $50, if depending on if you're a lobbyist or principal. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. De minimis lobbying. There is no de minimis lobbying. If you're lobbying, you're lobbying. So you have to register if you meet the definition. Sporting and recreational events that are not an integral part of an educational function or widely attended event are not permissible under the Ethics Act. Does that make sense to everybody as well? A few nods, okay. Okay, so this is the conference that are the reception that I'm talking about in the middle of the conference. It's not an official part of the conference, but it's the beginning of the day or when no other activities are taking place and consists of everybody at the conference is invited. And is sanctioned by the conference. That can be considered an integral part of your event that's pre-certified. And we can tell you that, we will tell you that when you send it in. Okay, this is allows for aggregation if you have multiple sponsors of an event, but you have to identify what your portion of that sponsorship was and what amount because it affects the reporting requirements. So if you are paying for all rooms for the conference, then that's what you allot. You know, you can't just give, one sponsor can't give 10,000 and one give, 500 and it's the same reporting requirement. Okay, so you've got to report that money. Oh, okay, so if you cannot, any contracts that you are marketing to the state government, you have to register as a lobbyist. But anybody, if you're seeking county or local contracts, you do not. All right, that's the 1.1, that's it's called executive branch lobbying. But we gave Al Agricola a formal advisory opinion about that. So if you have any follow-up, you can look on our website or ask us about that. That's you.
Let me say this about those educational functions, widely attended events, because we get this question a lot. The limits that generally apply to what you can spend on a public official do not apply for these educational functions or widely attended event. Okay, you are not limited in the amount you can spend on food or hospitality, et cetera, for those. So we've had lobbyists before ask, is the 25, 50 limit apply there? No. If it's a pre-certified event, then those limits do not apply. However, what you do have to disclose is anything you have spent on a public official or a member of their household that exceeds $250 in a 24-hour period. So if you have a room that's $300 that you're covering for them, what you've got to do is disclose that even though it's pre-certified. All right, does that make some sense? And the advisory opinion Cynthia was talking about aggregation, for example, this is a good example because it was the group that asked for the advisory opinion. The BCA asked us, we have a ton of, Business Council of Alabama asked us, we have a ton of sponsors come in, how do we report all this stuff? And so what that opinion is directed to are how to report if there are multiple sponsors contributing to the same thing. And if you are all contributing to a fixed cost, there's a way you report that. If you alone are responsible for something that exceeds 250 in a 24-hour period, then you're responsible for reporting that. The point of the opinion was that each of you must accurately disclose what you have to disclose, which is payments in excess of 250. But if it's going into a pool that it's all split up the same, if it aggregates out to less than that, then nobody would have to report, okay? So if you find yourself in that type of situation where there are multiple sponsors and you're not sure, look at that opinion. If it's not clear to you in the context of the event that you are putting on, then ask us for guidance in that about how you apply that. But just know that there is an opinion out there directed to that. These are the main things I want you to remember. Update your registration within 10 days. That is mainly to make it easier on you. During the session, when people are over there lobbying, we get a ton of calls during the session, honestly saying so-and-so is over here lobbying and they haven't registered to lobby for this interest. So make sure that you update your registration so that we can say, yes, they have updated their registration. Communicate with your principal. Make sure y'all are on the same page about this. Remember your quarterly filings. We have noticed that in some offices, a lobbyist or a principal will task someone in the office with this disclosure. Make sure that you review it before it is submitted to us to make sure that it is accurate. Because it doesn't happen often, but sometimes you'll get called on it. Sometimes people will say, they didn't disclose the right amount. There have been news stories written about some of these with some of the larger events. One way that you can avoid that, and when those have happened, we've contacted the lobbyists and they've said, yeah, that wasn't right. The amount disclosed was the person didn't report it accurately. So make sure you eyeball it. Yes, sir.
You still must sign these quarterly reports and lobby.
Yes. But talk with Vicki about the mechanics of that. Okay. Remember the 10-day rule for pre-certifications. Also, since I'm guessing none of you have asked for pre-certification, just know that the website gives you a cheat sheet because we do put everyone's letters up there. So you can see what someone else has requested. You can see what we have approved. You can see the follow-up questions we've asked. And so I think that standardizes the process and makes your job a little bit easier. There's nothing wrong with copying somebody else's work. It'll just make it easier for you, and I think would make the process a little bit easier the first time you do it. And remember to ask questions and ask them of Vicki Manning if you have any. Do you need to go? Y'all need to go. Take off for those of you who need to get out of here. Yeah, but that's it. Do we have any other questions from the room? I do have one question that was texted in. Can a lobbyist, does a lobbyist need to report buying their own lunch or paying for parking while visiting the State House? In other words, no funds spent on a public servant or public employee. The only thing that we care about, and the only thing that the ethics laws care about, is what you were expending on behalf of a public official or a public employee or anybody else covered by the Act. You do not have to report what you spend on yourself. Okay? Any other questions, either online or in the room? And let's just give it 45 seconds since there's a bit of a delay. Anything that we've covered here a bit unclear to you? I mean, I realize that y'all might not want to throw up a hand right now, but thank you.
Go back to, I guess, taking or hunting, I guess.
Right?
Can you go back over that one more time?
Sure. I don't know. What are you comfortable asking a specific question?
Yeah, taking a public official hunting. Let me say this. We know that you have personal relationships with a lot of these people, and some of it probably predates your time as a lobbyist. And certainly if it does, there's an exception that covers that. What Cynthia was talking about is our pre-certification process. There's an advisory opinion that was put out in 2011 from the Commission that said that we will not pre-certify anything that is purely social. And the context of that was a hunting trip. A lobbyist wanted to take a group hunting in Montana, I believe, and wanted us to pre-certify it as a widely attended event. And the Commission said that they would not do that. If you own the land, okay, it's your private farm, and you're taking somebody hunting, that is not something that, and that's all you're really doing with that. That is a fact pattern that is not going to raise many issues, if any, under the Act. If you are taking them to a private farm, that there is a price that must be paid for their attendance, and so their attendance there is reducible down to a dollar figure that would then fit within the definition of a thing of value, then that is something that I think you should ask for guidance on. That's not the way I see it come up with an organized commercial trip like that, or at least I'm not asked about that. I get a lot more of the things. I've got a fish pond over here. Can I take somebody fishing? Sure. That's that kind of social interaction that there's really no hard dollar figure that can be attached to it. It's motivated by a relationship. There's nothing exchanged other than just the afternoon, and they keep the fish, the bass they pull out of your pond. Then again, that's not something I think you ought to spend a lot of time worrying about. If it's a commercial trip, a commercial deep sea fishing trip, those kind of things would be. Yeah. Sure. Let me see if there's any other questions that I've got, and I don't think that there are.
There's another hand.
I'm sorry?
There's one hand.
Oh, yes, ma'am.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I was just texting. I'm kidding.
So for those of us that are completely new to this, or maybe just me,
Yes, ma'am.
is there any way we can get copies of the slides, or is that on the website, or?
No, we'll be happy to give them to you. Sure. If you will give Vicki your email address or make sure she knows, who you are, I'm fine if she emails it to you.
Thank you.
Sure. I mean, all we do is pull all this out of the code, so that's all you're getting.
If you organize a reception and you open up to the entire legislature, 100% is not going to attend.
Right.
You estimate how many attend. So is that dollar amount then calculated on those that attended, or is it on the entire legislature?
A legislative reception is likely going to qualify as a widely attended event that you probably are going to have asked us to pre-certify. If we pre-certified it, then you don't need to worry about the dollar amount. unless it exceeds $250 per person. And if you got that kind of cash, then it's going to be a good party. But the question for those on the webinar were if you have a widely attended event and you invite the entire legislature but less than them show up, is there a reporting requirement for that? Remember what I said earlier, that on these events that are pre-certified, there's not a limit on what you can spend on the public official or public employee. However, if it does exceed $250 in a 24-hour period, then you just do have to report that. Let's see. Let me make sure this is. Oh, no, that's a follow-up question on something else. All right, any other questions? Any other thing we can do to make you feel more comfortable before you launch into this? Okay, just know that this is not the end of the conversation. This is just the beginning of our relationship with you. Vicki is your contact person, but that does not exclude anybody else in the office. Feel free to ask any of us. If you were in town and you want to stop by and you want to talk about something, please do it. We are here and our door is always open to you, and we really do enjoy the interaction. We do want to keep you within the rules, so there's, again, no reason for you to stray outside of them, okay, because we really want to help you. All right, so if there's nothing else, thank you for attending. Good luck to you, and just know we're here for you. Thanks.